Just 25 watts when you're awake. That's what the human brain can do. The human brain, and you can just start listing down these things, fellas, in the back. The human brain is an amazing thing. Did you know? Anytime you can come down with the list of stuff. Yeah, our brain weighs 3 pounds. Did you know that in a day, you have about 70,000 thoughts in one day? That's a lot, right? That's a lot of thoughts. Maybe some of you it's a little bit less, who knows? Your brain represents 2% of your body weight. Your brain uses 20% of the oxygen in your blood. I mean, amazing facts about your brain. And this up here, your brain, your mind, is the only place where you can answer the question, who am I? We want to get real here in chapel and try to push into your heart, into your mind, and to figure out, okay, well really, who are you? Only you can answer that. You may say, okay, well, I put on my school hat and I come to school and I act one way. I go home and I act a totally different way. Maybe I'm with my friends and I act totally different than when I'm at home or when I'm at school. You have 3 different people going on. We don't really know who we are. We can't answer that question. That's what I want to challenge you with this morning. We're going to be talking about a family. The family of David. We all know David. David, you know him as the young boy, right? He went up to the field where the Philistines were fighting, and he thought he was so cool carrying up some lunches for his brothers. He gets up there and realizes there's a giant. There's a giant hurling insults at them, and it's not really a big deal, except when he hears that the giant starts hurling insults at God, the God Almighty. He says, that's not going to happen. Guys, you're not doing anything about this? Well, I will. He steps up, and we know the story. He goes and he gets 5 smooth stones, and he gets his sling, and he ends up whacking the guy in the head. The guy falls, the giant falls, he goes over, cuts his head off, and it's over. He instantly gets rock star status because he won for everybody. He's so popular. The king finds out, and he puts him in his army, even has him into his own palace. David's playing music for him. But something happens where the king isn't as popular as David. The king comes along and they say, oh, Saul has killed his thousands. And David comes along and they say, David has killed his 10,000s. Instantly this makes the king so upset. And so he basically commits his life to killing David. David is then on the run. We finally find out that through everything, God protected him. Didn't allow him to be killed. He ultimately takes the throne and becomes king. When you're king, you can pretty much do what you want. Ain't nobody going to question you. David, he walks up to the top of his house. And he looks over the way and he sees a fine-looking girl. And she is bathing. That's right. And if she's bathing, you know she's naked. David sees her and goes, woo! Okay, we know that he has some lust in his mind. His mind starts being taken over by just this image. And he can think of nothing else than getting this image and bringing it over to his house and having his way with her. That's what he's thinking about. He can think of nothing less. His mind is focused on that. He's the king. He sends for her, brings her over. It happens. He feels guilty. He figures out, oh man, what have I done? So he sees it. He wants it. He goes and gets it. And now he's trying to cover it up. He thinks, okay, well, here's what I'll do. I'll bring home her husband. Because remember, that's the big thing. She was married. She's sleeping with another man's wife. He sends for the husband and says, okay, bring the husband home. His hope is that the husband will then come home and sleep with his wife. And then when she's pregnant, he'll think, oh, it's mine. But the husband, his mind is a whole lot more focused than his king. He comes home and he knows his job is to sit and to be on watch because he's part of the army. He's more focused. His mind is more focused than David was. And so he comes home and he doesn't touch her. And he leaves and David's like, oh man, that plan kind of backfired. So what do I have to do now? I have to make sure that he's out of the picture. He basically commits murder. He has Uriah killed. He's out of the way. And then he waits the appropriate morning time, takes her as his wife, and you know the rest of the story from there. His mind was warped. Well, from there, you have his 2 older sons. You see, the one son of David that we always talk about is Solomon. But we miss the two older sons in the middle. You have one older son whose name is Amnon, and the other is Absalom. We don't hear a lot about them. As I was reading through this narrative, and you can find it in 2 Samuel and in the 1 Kings, is this narrative is pretty interesting. You have Amnon, who's got a sister. And he loves his sister very much. Not in a sisterly way. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. He sees his sister and he thinks, the same thing David thought about another man's wife. Woo, she's fine. This is sister. What's going on here? It says in the Bible, in the text, that he was so frustrated because he knew this is his sister and he can't do anything about it. It would be wrong and disgusting. It doesn't stop him. What he tries to do is he goes to the king and he says, okay, I want my sister to bring me some food. I'm sick. Have her bring me some food. So the king agrees. Brings in the food and he lures her into the bedroom and basically says, well, what do you think? She knows what's going through his mind. And basically saying, what are you, crazy? What are you, nuts? This isn't going to happen. And she said, you're going to disqualify yourself. Keep in mind, Amnon is the oldest. He's next in line for the kingship. He will throw it all away if he does this. She goes, no, it's not going to happen. Goes to walk out the door. What does he do? He takes his sister and he rapes her. Can you imagine? Imagine this. Imagine Absalom, who's her brother. Amnon's mind was taken over by lust. It was much. It was disgusting. He couldn't focus anymore other than getting that one thing. And when he got it, it disqualified him for the kingship. Absalom finds out. Is furious. You would be too. I can't imagine what I would do if someone were to do that to my wife or to my daughters or my sister. No matter if it was blood or not, I tell you, I would be angry. Absalom gets brutally angry. He wants nothing more than Amnon to be dead. He wants to murder him. For 2 years, the text says, he thought of nothing else than killing his brother. For 2 years, it took up stock in his mind. That's all he could think about. At the end of the 2 years, there was a festival that the king normally goes to, and Absalom was going to, and he asked the king, his father, he said, can you send Amnon with me? And the king's like, I don't know, their relationship isn't that good. He agrees to it. Absalom says to his servants, take him out and kill him. He doesn't even do it with his own hands, just like his father. These are the two oldest brothers, or the two oldest sons of David, guilty of committing the same exact sins as their dad did. Sexual immorality, murder. This is what he produced. This is what was going down generation after generation. Then comes along Solomon, who we know more about than the other two. We know that he was a wise king. David said to Solomon before he died, he said, look, I have one instruction for you. If I can tell you one thing, it is simply to do this, to obey God. He's basically saying, look, Solomon, do as I say, not as I do. Which is really an impossible thing to do. You're going to do what you see laid out for you. Solomon had the job of building the temple. David had been stockpiling things for him, precious stones and silver and gold and wood, all to build this temple. So Solomon's got this job, but first he says, I want to be a good king like my dad. He was good with the people. I want to be able to solve problems. And so God appeared to him in a dream and said, Solomon, what do you want? Solomon said, I want wisdom. I want to be able to help people. God said, okay, you got it. And I'm going to give you everything else that we all would have asked for. Power, money, fame, all that kind of stuff, honor. He gets that too. So he starts off and he's building this temple and he goes to great lengths to make sure it is correct. So much so that he takes all the stone and all the things that would have been loud in the temple. All the banging and beating and sawing, all that kind of stuff. And it's done on a separate, in a separate place, off-site. Then he trucks it in and he brings it in so there's no loud noises in the temple. He went to great lengths. The Bible says it took him 7 years to build the temple of God. What you don't know is that he was building his own house with a lot of the same materials. And it took him 13 years to build his own house. Double the time, right? His mind is already starting to get focused on himself. In chapter 10, it says that he was the most powerful person in the world. The wisest, the richest. He had it all going on. It was starting to get to his head. He was starting to become pompous and arrogant. He was building thrones. He built himself a big ivory throne and he laced it with gold. Look at me. He was stockpiling weapons for himself, which was against the Mosaic law. He's having horses and chariots shipped in. He had ships that would go out for 3 years and gather all the stuff to bring him. Exotic animals and all the finest things you can think of. People were still coming to him to hear from God, but what was he thinking about? He was just thinking about himself. His mind was being taken away. Early on in his life, it says that Solomon loved God very much, and he would do anything for him. Chapter 11, it says that Solomon's mind was taken over by love for foreign women. He had been making these marriage alliances with Egypt and other countries. And he took on so many wives that his mind started to get warped and turned, and all he could think about was these women. He went from building the temple of God to then having his wives and his women come up to him and say, "Oh, Solomon, can we build temples to our false gods?" Okay, I'll let that happen. Then they say, "Well, will you help us?" "Okay, I'll give you some money." "Okay, will you help us even further?" "Okay, I'll give you some workers. I'll give you the land." He used to build a temple for God, and now he's building a temple for false idols. The family of David, what a messed up family. It started with David and it went generation to generation. Why was all this happening? Because their minds were not focused on what they should be. Their minds were messed up and full of junk. And that was what was coming out in their actions. The challenge for us today is to look at how our minds are. You see up here, I got a couple things. I have a bottle of water, which most of you know I don't travel anywhere without a bottle of water. Now, this bottle of water, what you don't know about your brain is when you were born, you have pretty much all the brain cells you're going to have. You're going to gain a few more, but pretty much that's it. And by the time you're age 18, your brain stops growing. Pretty interesting. You're born, and your brain kind of looks like this because it's pure. You don't know a whole lot. You don't know a whole lot of junk. A lot of junk hasn't passed through your ears and through your eyes. You get into elementary school, and you're still pretty clean. Now, I understand this starts earlier and earlier, it seems, which frightens me as a father. You get into middle school. All of a sudden, what you have sin entering your mind. Just little by little. You have sin just kind of creeping in. And you see, it's just a tint. You can barely see it, right? It's not a lot. It's not a big deal. I'm learning a little bit about birds and bees, more than what my parents probably teach me. I'm worried about things that maybe I shouldn't be worried about. And as you move forward, your mind starts to get worse and worse. And your mind starts to get corrupt. Now look, I know we can't isolate ourselves.